I'm Heather Britton, and I direct the Environmental and Natural Resources Law Center here at the University of Oregon School of Law. And it's my special honor to introduce Marta Clifford to begin our program with a blessing. A Chinook and Cree member of the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, Marta belongs to many communities in which she stands as a pillar, providing essential support and structure. A skillful organizer, she is active in local efforts to support the missing and murdered Indigenous women movement and frequently organizes in our community to this end. An auntie to all, she provides critical support and mentorship to students in the University of Oregon's Native American and Indigenous Studies program, as well as the NACE academic residential community. A talented storyteller and actress, Marta also teaches in the university's Department of Theater Arts. This year, she has a new play with co-creator Teresa May. Blue Jay's Canoe will premiere at the Very Little Theater this November. I think there are flyers outside in the hallway, so we hope to see you all there. And thank you, Marta, for all that you do, including being here today. Please.
So hi, welcome everybody. If you can stand, please do. Say Halitai, creator of all things. Watch over us today. Help us to open our ears and our hearts and hear what the speaker has to say. Such a wonderful topic in these trying times. Help us to be kind and show our love for each other. We need each other so much now. It's so important that we stick together in our beliefs and in our powers. We ask that you help us to watch over the children, the elders, and the students. I humbly ask these things and hope that the ancestors are here to help us today. I can feel them around me. I hope you can too. Haimasi se halitai. Amen.
Thank you. That was lovely.
Marta, thank you so much for those beautiful words. We so appreciate your continued support for this event, for our community and for our Native students in particular. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to be with you today. My name is Jen Reynolds. I serve as Dean and Dave Frommmeyer Chair in Leadership and Law here at the University of Oregon School of Law. On behalf of the Law School, our Environmental and Natural Resources Law Center, and the Native Environmental Sovereignty Project, I am delighted to welcome you to the 19th Annual Rennard Strickland Lecture. This event would not be possible without the invaluable support of our dedicated partners, including the university's Department of Native American and Indigenous Studies, the Wayne Morse Center for Law and Politics, and the Native American Law School Association. We are grateful for you and also for all the students, faculty, staff, and community members who are here today. Welcome. Before we introduce our speaker, please allow me to acknowledge where we gather today. This is Kalapuya Ilihi, the traditional ancestral homeland and cultural center of the Kalapuya, where Kalapuya peoples and their descendants lived, worked, worshiped, raised children, built communities, and stewarded the lands and waters for thousands of years. Today, many Kalapuya descendants are citizens of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. In addition to the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, what many people today call Oregon is also the traditional homelands of the Burns Paiute tribe, the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians, the Klamath Tribes, and other nations and peoples with sacred connections to this land. These sovereign nations and their citizens, as well as those with ancestral connections that are not federally recognized, persevere and thrive, continuing to contribute to communities within and beyond the University of Oregon. Just as one example, this past summer, the ENR Center's Food Sovereignty Project visited Teltum. Teltum is a community farm managed by the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. The farm serves as a model for a variety of food sovereignty initiatives with orchards and first food gardens and an apothecary and more. Teltum provides food, medicine, and stewardship opportunities within and beyond the Siletz tribe. It was so valuable for our students to learn about the farm, discuss the tribe's food sovereignty work, build community, and help plant a pollinator garden. The experience exemplified the enduring commitment of Kalapuya descendants to carry forward the work of their ancestors, stewarding and storying their lands, waters, and culture. I now invite Philip H. Knight, Professor of Law, Mary C. Wood, to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you so much, Dean Reynolds. My name is Mary Christina Wood, and I am a professor of law here at University of Oregon School of Law, and also faculty director of the Environmental and Natural Resources Law Center and faculty leader of the Native Environmental Sovereignty Project. And I want to first echo the Dean's thanks to Marta. We are also honored by your presence and your words. Thank you. Momentarily, it will be my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce our 19th speaker for the Rennard Strickland Lecture. But first, I want to acknowledge a very special guest here today, Mr. Chuck Sams, over here in the third row. And many of you, I'm sure, remember he was our wonderful speaker at this event last year, although he zoomed in from Washington, D.C. During the Biden administration, Mr. Sams, an enrolled member of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, became the first Indigenous director of the National Park Service. And now we are thrilled that he is serving here at University of Oregon Law as the Oregon Tribe Scholar in Residence and Senior Fellow with the ENR Center's Native Environmental Sovereignty Project. Yes, and we are embarking on very important research with him, so thank you so much for being here, Chuck. I also want to say a few words about someone else we are here to honor and remember, the incomparable Rennard Strickland, whose passing in 2021 certainly did not mark the end of his incredible legacy, a legacy that we strive to carry on through this annual lecture series. An Osage citizen of the Cherokee Nation, Rennard was widely regarded as a national leader in Indian law and actually a founder of the whole field of Indian law. And throughout his lifetime, he published more than 40 books spanning topics from misconceptions about the legal profession to Cherokee lifeways, and he authored numerous articles and book chapters even in addition to those 40 books. He served as editor-in-chief of the 1982 transformational revision of the Cohen Handbook of Federal Indian Law, and was a member of the editorial board of the 2005 edition. A legend in the field of legal education, he held leadership roles in the American Association of Law Schools and the Society of American Law Teachers. Here at Oregon Law, Rennard was a giant, as many of us remember. He served as dean and then professor, and in both roles, he contributed mightily to our environmental and natural resources and Indian law program. In recognition of his incredible spirit and accomplishments, the ENR Center's Native Environmental Sovereignty Project created this Rennard Strickland Lecture Series in 2006 to carry on his legacy. This series is rooted in Rennard's vision, which can be summarized by the following quote from his monumental 1997 book, Toronto's Revenge, where he wrote, "If there is to be a post-Columbian future, a future for any of us, it will be an Indian future." Indeed, Indian epistemologies and tribal sovereignty are essential to all our futures, a point that our speakers bring to us every year through this lecture. And that is why I'm so pleased to turn to our speaker, Ms. Amy Bowers Cordalis, and her talk, "The Water Remembers, and So Does the Law." Ms. Cordalis is a mother, fisherwoman, attorney, and a member and former general counsel of the Yurok tribe, the largest the largest indigenous nation in what many now call California. Her family is from the village of Requa, which sits at the mouth of the Great Klamath River. Her family's Supreme Court case, Motts versus Arnett, reaffirmed the status of the Yurok Reservation as Indian country, laying the very foundation for the exercise of the tribe's sovereignty and the enjoyment of its federally reserved water rights and fishing rights. Since the onset of colonialization, every generation of Amy Cordalis' family has fought for Yurok rights. She proudly continues this vital work of her ancestors today. Formerly a staff attorney at the Native American Rights Fund, she now serves as co-founder and co-director of the Ridges to Riffles Indigenous Conservation Group, a nonprofit organization advancing Indigenous sovereignty through the protection of natural and cultural resources. She is the recipient of the United Nations' highest environmental honor, Champion of the Earth Laureate, and has been named to the second annual Time 100 Climate List, which features, as many of you may know, the 100 most influential leaders driving business to real climate action. In her role, Ridges to Riffles, Cordalis leads efforts to support tribes, protecting their sovereignty, their lands, and their waters. This has included working on the world's largest ever river restoration project, the undamming of the Klamath River, which was completed in late 2024. A monumental legacy. Her book, The Water Remembers, My Indigenous Family's Fight to Save a River and a Way of Life, is forthcoming next month. And we have paper pre-order forms available right here outside the room, so please do consider taking one after the lecture. And for those joining us by Zoom, there is a pre-order link available on our Rennard Strickland Lecture event page. To quote Charles Wilkinson, a beloved friend to so many of us, not with us physically on this plane, but surely with us spiritually. He said, Cordalis' book is a brightly written, driving narrative of tribal voices and many other people, a joyous and uplifting story. And as Laguna Pueblo tribal member and former U.S. Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland said of the book, Amy's personal story intertwines with the river, the salmon, the history, and the present moment in a beautiful narrative that invites all of us into the mission of protecting our lands and waters. Amy, we are beyond fortunate that you agreed to share your time, your energy, and your vision with our community far and wide this afternoon. We truly cannot thank you enough for the work you do today, and certainly for the work you will continue to do throughout Indian country. With that, everyone please join me in welcoming Amy Bowers Cordalis.
Okay, mic check. Are we good? Okay, all right. And look, I can walk. Ayakui, Nek Now, Amy Bowers Cordalis, Nuwak Rekwoi, Numate Wa, Wak Lao, Wak Lao, Wak Lao. I am so thrilled to be here today, and thank you for that introduction. Thank you to the law school for having me. Thank you to the specific lecture series. I am so honored to be the 19th speaker and join folks like Sam and other brilliant legal minds here. And it's a bit of a homecoming. I did my undergraduate here, and a lot of the informative events that led me to this moment started here on campus. And I love my ducks. Like hardcore, right? So much, I had a ribbon skirt made in honor of the University of Oregon. This university allowed me to explore all kinds of different parts of myself, and really gave, an opportunity for like a res girl to come and learn and be comfortable exploring my own, dare I try to say this word, ingenuity. And gave me an education that I could go on to get a law degree and do all the work and everything that happened. So I'm so grateful to this community, to this school. I'm grateful to all of you for being here now in this moment and spending your time here with me. And thank you to you for saying that wonderful prayer, and it really spoke to my heart because we are in a moment, right? Like there's a lot of intense energy, and one thing I feel really strongly about is that we will prevail. Nature will prevail. We are in it for the long run. And the people, we are a part of nature, right? And Indigenous peoples have always been rooted in a duty, right? A duty to steward and to protect. For a long time, we have been the beneficiaries of the wild abundance of this planet. And we have ancient knowledge, traditional knowledge about how to interact with the natural world in balance, how to make ecosystems thrive so that everything lives symbiotically and that the people are actually part of that. And that information in this exact moment is so critical. And that's, I think, what you were, actually, that's how I interpreted your prayer. Yeah, so today, for me, and what I hope to give you all is some energy, right? Like, and some hope and a blueprint, right? Like, we can do this. We're in a hard moment, but we're gonna get out of it, and every single one of us is in it to win it, right? And so I'm gonna get into the specifics. I have like a PowerPoint, I've got video clips, so you're gonna have to bear with me as we go kind of back and forth, but I think in the long run it's all gonna be worth it. So I couldn't be more thrilled to be with you all. So here we go. So in, let's see, I'm gonna take this over here. And if I put this here, will that disrupt anything? I don't think it will do that. Okay. So, on the Klamath, we are in what I like to call year zero. 2025 is the first year of historic, remarkable change. In 2024, we removed 4 dams from the mid-Klamath, opening up the river once again to flow free in a way it hadn't done in over 100 years. Yeah, so it's exciting, it's good, and I love this energy. Like, we're gonna let this flow. We also, and I don't know if folks know about this, but we are also doing restoration projects on about 20,000 acres that will continue through 2028. And so literally the whole landscape, the whole river, the whole basin is changing in ways that is just mind-blowing. What I think is most exciting about the Klamath is that it will prove that nature-based solutions work, and that we, the humans, can solve these massive, climate crisis problems when we work in nature and try to restore that balance that I was talking about earlier. Klamath dam removal is a scalable climate crisis model. We can replicate it in other places. And it's a path toward healing ourselves and the planet. And I'm going to tell you how I did it, or how we did it. One of the lessons I learned from representing my tribe for over just like 12 years now, and also just learning from Yurok elders, is to accomplish change, you really have to see it first. And a lot of our elders on the Klamath, they had the audacity to be the first to call for dam removal because they could see it. Those myths, those stories had been passed down to generations, and so they knew what it was like to live on a healthy river, and they were able to see it. So before I get into the law, this is a law lecture, so I'll give you a little bit of that. I want to clear our minds. I want us to sort of get in our own bodies and make some space for a new future. So I'm going to do that through a meditation. And I know that we are in a law school. We're in a lecture hall. And I will be honest that being in these spaces, I'm like taken back to when I was like a first-year law student. I have like a torts exam that's about to happen, and I'm like horrified of the bar exam in a few years. So it's it'll be good for me to go through meditation also. And I want to frame it like this. So my dad, the Honorable Judge Bill Bowers, he's a Yurok Tribal Court judge, he always tells me that you can't keep putting your hand in the mousetrap over and over again and expect a different outcome, right? And so during this meditation, I really want us to just clear our minds of our old ways of doing that. Right? Our old ways of sticking our hand in the mousetrap, and get out of that and start looking for something else. So I am going to get my clip going here. I'm going to show us a video of the first, if I can find it, it's actually this salmon, the leader salmon. This is one of the first salmon that came back and spawned after Klamath dam removal. And I'm going to show this as we go through this meditation. Okay, so let's hope it starts. Here we go. And then, how do I make this big? I know, there it is, huh? Why is it? Oops. Oh, taking it away. Here, let's see. I don't know if I can get that any bigger.
The green button at the top left.
I know, slideshow. Thank you for the audience assist. There we go. Okay, and then I don't know if we have audio, but that's okay. Did it go? It's not playing.
You're doing great, though.
Here, we'll just do it this way. Okay, you guys ready? It'll still do the trick. Ready? Okay. All right. You guys ready? Okay, there she is. Okay, so we're gonna do it. All right. Okay, so start by putting your hand over your heart. Kind of get comfortable. Take a big breath in and out. You can either close your eyes or you can keep watching the leader salmon. And picture yourself on the Klamath River. Maybe you're in a boat, maybe you're on shore, and you're comfortable, you don't have anything to do, you just get to witness. And I'll tell you a story. In Yurok, there is a myth. The sun and the moon are lovers, and the dawn is their favorite time because they are together in the sky. The new day is their baby. It is a gift to us, and that is why it is called the present. We must be thankful for the present to honor the sun and the moon and the power of love. We will forgive the past by giving up hope that the past could have been different. We will let go of the burden of the past, and this allows space in our hearts and minds for new energy and ideas that will lead to a better future. In this space, I want all of us to be in the present, full of gratitude for the opportunity to gather today to discuss and learn how we will renew the world using every tool we have available. We believe in our collective ability to solve the world's most pressing environmental challenges of our time because we have seen a start of that on the Klamath. So we are here together in the present, our minds clear of the past, ready to receive a new, better future. So breathe in and breathe out. All right, okay. We'll get to the law now, the largest river restoration project in history. Here we go. Okay, I'm gonna close this out, and I'm gonna put this back on, and we're gonna go straight to Requa. So this is where I'm from. We're just going to do that. Okay. This is the mouth of the Klamath River. And this is, my family is from the north side of the river, from a village called Requa, and we've been there since the beginning of time. Yurok people have always been in this area. We're on the lower 45 river miles. You can kind of see how the river winds up into the first Cascade Range. That area, the kind of backside, top part of this picture, that's called the high country. That's our sacred lands. And the whole Klamath Basin, I'm going to give a map here, is Indian country. There were Indians from top to bottom. So you saw Yurok as you go up to the confluence of the Trinity River. That's where the Hupa people are. Then you go further upriver, and you've got the Karuk people in the mid area. There's the Shasta people, there's Quartz Valley people, and then as you go further up, you get into the Klamath tribe's traditional territories. And I don't want to over-romanticize our Aboriginal times, but what I will say is we had it pretty good, y'all. Like the Klamath River was historically the third largest salmon-producing river in all the lower continental U.S. And so our whole way of life, and this is true for all the tribes, really revolved around salmon fishing, right? And then there are iconic sturgeon, there are steelhead, there are trout, there are eels. And one of the cool things, too, is, of course, there was also the Pacific Ocean. And so the lower downriver people would trade with the upriver people and, just amplify the abundance. But I think the thing there that I want to share is that we really did have a culture of abundance. And because we had abundance, there were complex Aboriginal law, customs, practices, way of being that helped us to remain in balance with the natural world, and while we also, use those resources. And then colonization happened. And I'm not going to go too deep into it other than to note that up at the top of the basin, there is the Klamath Reclamation Project that was authorized in 1905. That converted 200,000 acres of wetlands into an agricultural project, drained the lower Klamath Lake, and then built something like 1,500 miles of irrigation canals to bring Klamath River water, upper Klamath Lake water to irrigate those fields. And then the other piece of that was the US government entered into contracts for water allocations and deliveries with the farmers in that area. And then go downriver, and beginning in 1911, there were 4 dams that were built right in the middle of the river. And remember how I said that the Klamath was the 3rd largest salmon producing river? Well, genius idea. Let's build those dams without any fish passage. So no fish passage. So this Iron Gate Dam, you can see right in the middle, that was the end of the line for salmon after, and here they are, after 1962. So these are the 4 dams. Iron Gate up here on the top left is the lowest downriver dam, and then Copco 2 here, and then Copco 1, and then J.C. Boyle. So, good times there. I'm going to show you something. So behind the dams, this is what it looked like. There were about 2,000 acres of riparian land right along the river stretch that was turned into reservoirs. And every year, you know, beginning probably in the 80s, 90s, there were these toxic blue-green algae blooms that would explode in the reservoirs, and then this water would go all the way down the river and essentially poison everything that it passed. That eventually led to this. Yep. So, you know, remember how we've got Indians, we've got an agricultural project, a reclamation project, we've got dams, we've got pollution, and in 2002, all of this accumulated in the largest fish kill in American history. 70,000 adult salmon died within the Yurok Reservation. It was mostly concentrated on the lower 12 miles of the Klamath River, which just happens to be, you know, the stretch that I have the strongest connection to. When this happened, I was a junior in undergrad here, and I was home doing a tribal fisheries internship, and my job had been to count the tribal catch to make sure we didn't overharvest. And then in late September, just before I was coming back, this happened. And it changed the trajectory of my life, but so many other people. This moment, which essentially was caused by bad resource management. How I will say this is that, you know, the people were colonized, but then the river was colonized, right? Through all of that development in the 1900s. And what's interesting is if you think about it, you know, that last dam, Iron Gate, was built in 1964, and then this happened in 2002. So it really wasn't that long of a time when it really felt like the river, had been colonized, and then ecological disaster happens. And this particular event was caused by the then Vice President Dick Cheney, who wanted votes in Oregon. They had lost I think the last round in Oregon by like 0.1%. And so it was basically a political strategy to get more votes, to give water to the agricultural community in lower Oregon, southern Oregon. And as a result, you know, water levels fell to the lowest levels in history on the bottom part of the river on my reservation, and it killed the fish. The interesting thing about the fish kill was that it really was like the canary in the coal mine that alerted not only the indigenous peoples of the basin, but others, our allies, that if we didn't dramatically change our ways and the way that we manage the Klamath, more of this was going to happen. And that was unacceptable, thank goodness, to a lot of people. Particularly, and I appreciated how you talked about our duties also as Indigenous people to steward, because for us, what this did was it triggered our duty to go out and to start renewing the world. And so we launched the Undam the Klamath movement. And again, it really started with the Indigenous peoples and the leaders and the grassroots organizers who went all over the world protesting whoever company owned the dams. It changed in that 20-year process, but eventually ownership landed with Warren Buffett, the richest man in the world, who then became our opponent. And one thing I want to share, because I think it's a powerful sort of point of reference, is that this is all happening in the early 2000s, and by the early 2000s, there was only about 10% of the historical Klamath salmon runs left. And then you go back a century, by the early 1900s, there was only 10% of the California indigenous peoples left. So you think about that, the first 100 years of colonization wiped out 90% of California's indigenous population. The next 100 years under a colonial regime knocked out 90% of our first food, right? And that really was a form of ecocide against us. And so that launched us into this movement of having to implement that duty, right? In the creation story, what we learned was that Yurok country, the Klamath Basin, was essentially created for the indigenous peoples, but we had to live in balance with it by stewarding it, never taking more than what we need. And our instructions were that if we did that, we would never want for anything, and everything would be okay. But if we fought over it, if we used too much, then things would go away. And so clearly by the 2000s, even if it wasn't us who were taking and harming, it was humans. And so the world was severely out of balance. And so we started with the grassroots movements, and then opportunity knocked. So in 2007, the FERC license to operate the Klamath dams would expire. And FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and in most cases it has authority to license hydropower projects. And so in 2006, Pacificor, which owned the dams, a subsidiary of Warren Buffett's companies, filed an application in FERC to relicense the dams status quo, no changes, for another 50 years. And that would have been a death sentence for the river. And so this is also the law part of this. So anybody who's here for that, perk up. No, just kidding. So what the FERC relicensing proceeding gave everybody essentially an opportunity to present their case. So FERC, is a quasi-judicial branch. It's got both administrative type of agency roles, but it also has a commission and does hearings. And so, of course, the indigenous peoples and our allies advocated for dam removal, and Pacificor pushed for just status quo, no changes. And eventually, all of this led to a trial-type hearing, and one of the things that Yurok did was work really hard building alliances through that FERC proceeding with other tribes, with other NGOs. And one thing I've learned about Yurok diplomacy, and I think this is an important practice point for working in Indian country, is there's such a focus on reservation rights, but oftentimes the cultural and natural resources that are critical to maintain an indigenous way of life are located off reservation. And so you really do have to be creative about how you expand. You can call it jurisdiction, you can expand your sovereignty through diplomacy and making partnerships. And one of the things we did was really go back to that core value of how are we supposed to interact with the natural world, and taught our allies about concepts of balance and humans being a part of nature. And then I think what's really cool about how Indian law has developed, thanks to Mr. Professor Strickland and others, Charles, all of them, is that we work together, right? And really uplifting those tribal rights. And they're still not as strong as they should be, but one of the things we did through the FERC proceeding was assert those Yurok federally reserved rights. So relying on the Matz case, right? Relying on a series of cases that had demonstrated and made it so it was precedent that the Yurok people had reserved their Aboriginal rights to fish, to hunt, their sovereignty. And specifically with the FERC relicensing proceeding, we argued that our federally reserved fishing rights demanded dam removal because it was very clear that the dams were harming the fishing right. You couldn't get to, the salmon couldn't get to their historical spawning grounds. We're down to single-digit percentages of the runs. Our fishing seasons had been closed, for years and years and years, on and off. And then what we did is worked with our environmental allies and even our allies, who understood hydropower law. And in the Federal Power Act, good old Federal Power Act, Section 8, there is a requirement that dams that are subject to FERC jurisdiction, when they go through a relicensing proceeding, if there are salmon, and I can never say that word, anadromous fish. Did I nail it? See, this is what I'm saying. I can never say it for the life of me. But in any event, those things that go in the ocean and then come back. Any place there, those are present. You have to have fish prescriptions. And NIMS has authority to not require but recommend fish prescriptions. And so through this trial type hearing at FERC, we had the tribal rights saying that you had to change the status quo in the relicensing proceeding in order to relicense it essentially. You got the Federal Power Act that requires fish prescriptions, and then you had various environmental laws that were also calling for additional protections. So FERC, to its credit, in the environmental impact statement, required the fish prescriptions that NIMS recommended. And those were basically installing fish ladders. And here's where it got really interesting. So there was an economic analysis done. And guess what? I kind of want someone to take a guess. Anyone want to take a wild guess what happened? And we're in the way of economic analysis. Go ahead.
It would have cost them more to put in the fish ladders. It would have been less expensive to take out the dams than put in the fish ladders.
Yes, you nailed it. Genius. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Woo woo! So, and I mean, you're Pacificor, you're Warren Buffett, so you're motivated by the bottom line. And so all of a sudden, here was this mutual interest between the NGOs, the tribes, and now the power companies, because it was cheaper to remove the dams than it would be to install the fish ladders, which FERC was going to require in order to renew the license to operate the dams. So we pressed pause on the FERC proceeding and started talking. And I'll get to this, but for a few years, we spent time, again, and from the UROC perspective, we spent time educating Berkshire Hathaway executives, Pacificor executives, and we spent time educating them about what it was like to live on the river, what it was like to be a fisher person, what a fishing way of life was, what our fishing rights were, how bad conditions were on the river. And essentially, all of that led to two historical agreements. The first was the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement, the KBRA, which was essentially a water allocation agreement between the tribes, the NGOs, and the farmers, and then it had habitat restoration work. And then also the Klamath Hydroelectric Settlement Agreement, which I'll call the KHSA. And the KHSA was a $450 million deal to remove the lower 4 Klamath dams by 2020 and restore habitat in the project area. It was a remarkable agreement because it put on equal footing the rights of the tribes, the rights of nature, and the business, all on equal footing. And in big part, that happened because the tribes, the NGOs, were so aligned and so powerful together that we were able to, uplift those historically, systemically, under-asserted, devalued rights and put it on equal footing with business. And I'm like, like feel that, right? Because that is a way that we can start kind of getting out of this unbalanced way of doing business. But it's got to start with that equal valuing of all of those different kinds of rights. Another practice tip is in the KHSA and through those negotiations, there were a gazillion problems to solve, right? But the approach that we took was basically find a rational path forward, and then that's how you can solve the problem. And then the general concept for dam removal was to create a nonprofit entity called the Klamath River Renewal Corporation, which would essentially take title to the land, be on the FERC license until it was set to expire, or until they actually took the dams out, and assume liability for dam removal, because that was the big concern from PacifiCorp is liability issues. So we stayed the FERC proceeding and we tried to go through Congress to pass a bill in order to get the funding and the authorizations for dam removal. Well, we had some bad timing and an ultra-conservative Congress was in place and we couldn't get the bill done. And sadly, the KBRA died in 2016 and we had to amend the KHSA and put the dam removal process back into FERC. And so we did that. And I think that's another important lesson too, is you're gonna fail. You know, when you're doing this kind of level of work, you're gonna fail. And the key is to just pivot and find yet again another rational path forward. So there we were back in FERC again, and FERC has a precedent of building dams. And in America, we have built a dam every single day since the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And that's FERC's precedent, that's their history, right? But also, the legal standard to approve a relicensing is whether or not it's in the public interest, right? So we filed new applications to basically transfer the license for the dams to the KRC, and then there would be a subsequent application to surrender the license. And long story short, we had an intense tribal consultation. And I wouldn't just say one consultation, it was like years and years of consultations with FERC where we would work with tribal leaders, we would work with tribal people to essentially communicate the harm that the dams was causing to their way of life. And they were so effective, so passionate. And so in the end, on November 2022, FERC approved Klamath dam removal. And the hearing was glorious. In the beginning of the hearing, the commissioner noted that it had a really bad history of approving hydropower dams, right? And that a lot of that development had harmed tribal rights, and acknowledged that they didn't even think about the tribal rights. And that the decision to approve Klamath dam removal was signaling a new era where the tribal rights would be considered. And then another commissioner noted that there were, so much testimony and consultation with the tribes and the tribal leaders that it was clear removing the dams was in the public interest. And so I think one of the messages from this is that, we can do hard things, but what's most important is to empower our own voices. Right? Empower our own voices, educate our own folks, and when you do that, you can get extremely good outcomes. So, I want to show y'all what happened after that. And this was the picture of the signing ceremony from the KHSA. Okay, so I'm going to show you all a clip of dam removal. You guys ready? Yes. Okay, here we go. Oh, we don't have sound though. Well, that's all right. Ooh, why is it going so fast? I mean, it felt like that. I'm not gonna lie. And I think in the Rivers perspective, it was that fast. But let's try that again. It's still. Wild. No? Okay, well, at least it's going slower. Okay. So this was, what is that, Copco 2? And then this is the draining of the reservoirs. This is how that looked. I actually got to blow up this dam too. Yeah, talk about dream come true, right? Yeah. Yeah. We put really dramatic music to this, so it's a little different, but you guys get the point. And there it is, the transformation. It's really just remarkable. Yeah. And here come the salmon. And what was so cool is, we removed the dams, and then it was like weeks later, the salmon came home and spawned. And no one expected that. Well, we expected that, but there had been 20 years of, the best scientists in the world studying dam removal, and they didn't anticipate that. But there they were, spawning. So there we go. Yeah. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here, and I have more pictures. So, here we go. Here. Okay. I'm just going to put it there. So, there were thousands of salmon that spawned. In June, so we basically removed the dams by August of 2024. Salmon immediately came home, and then it just starts getting better from that. In June, 2,800 acres within the former reservoir site were returned to the Shasta tribe. And I'm going to, let's see, actually I'll go over here and do this. In this area here, and here, there were 19 billion native seeds planted. 19 billion. And what's so cool about that is it's first foods, right? Like it's first foods, it's recreating ecosystems. And what's amazing is that dam removal was completed on time, within budget, within permit. And I think it's safe to say that for the most part, everything went as expected. We had some sediment in the river, of course, but Mother Nature helped us out last year, and it was a really wet year, and so we got a lot of rain that just pushed everything out. So, there's still more work to do, but we will sort of rest well knowing that the world is literally renewing itself in front of our eyes, and I hope we can all be a witness. So, just a few lessons learned. The Klamath Dams embodied the legacy of the underbelly of the founding of this country that supported the colonization and industrialization of nature at the expense of indigenous peoples, the environment, and marginalized communities. The ecological consequences of colonization, while devastating, need not be permanent. Dam removal sends a clear message that indigenous rights, leadership, and lifeways are not obstacles to progress. They are critical tools for sustaining life on Earth. The historical, systemic compromise of indigenous rights is and always has been a threat to our democracy because it's morally wrong and unconstitutional as treaty rights are the supreme law of the land. And we can no longer afford to destroy indigenous rights and their resources in service to money and power, in part because over 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is on Indian lands. So, and we talked a lot about this already, but what was guiding us through this process was our worldview that supported world renewal by restoring balance between the humans and nature. Since time immemorial, the river has supported us, and we have had the beneficiary of being, we have had the privilege of being the beneficiary, and with that comes a duty. We exercised those duties and responsibilities to the best that we could, and we failed over and over again until we didn't. And it proves that marginalized communities like mine can lead movements for historic, wide-ranging ecosystem change that can result in the more equitable distribution of resources, wealth, and power. And using this example, we can see that the overall health of our nation and our people and our ecosystems can be uplifted by allowing more voices and perspectives to contribute to our economy and our democracy. And this is good for people and the planet. Indeed, working together with our allies, there was not one champion of Klamath Dam removal. There were thousands who worked hard in big and small ways for over 20 years toward one common goal. And this proves that what you do matters. You know, how you use your life force matters, and that you can create change. And another practice point is, you know, when we look at the Indian law cases on reserve rights, on treaty rights, they often pit tribes against each other, right? I have this reserved water right, I have this reserved fishing right, and allocations, you know, between different tribes get nasty. Now, we still have work to do on the water stuff, but with dam removal, the tribes were able to work together and to leverage their collective rights along with our allies, and that's how we got to a different outcome. You know, so as a practice point, as you enter into your own practice, always remember to think, am I putting my hand in that mousetrap over and over again? Is there another way that I can do this? What are my mutual interests, right? And lean into those, and then use the law to create relationships, to create change. One other point, it ended up being $515 million that went into the economy through Klamath Dam removal. Yeah, and this proves that there is a business model out there that calls for the development of a global regenerative economy based on restoring ecological functions and also protecting Indigenous rights and human rights. So we don't have to continue to live out of balance. We can still be capitalists, but we can also uplift the rights of Indigenous peoples, the rights of nature. I have to share this too. So we did this with very little federal funding. That $515 million, it came from Pacificor, it came from Oregon, it came from California. And Sam, sorry about this comment, but we don't have to have the feds. Right? Yes, 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 we can do it. Come on, people, you can do it. You can do it. You can. So much more good is on its way, right? Did you all hear about the Indigenous kayakers who went down the river? Yeah, amazing. My niece was one of them, and I got to join the kayakers and actually kayaked at the top and then at the bottom. And those kids are showing us how to be together again. And for me, she, along with my 3 boys, are the first generation of my family since colonization that can simply enjoy the river. Yeah. They don't have to fight. And that's a way, you know, that's a path toward peace, right? It's toward renewal. And then there's more good coming. My nonprofit, the Ridges to Riffles Indigenous Conservation Group, my colleague Stephanie Quinn Davidson is here. She's our fisheries biologist. Love you. We are working on all kinds of different things to help restore the river. One of the things I'm most excited about is we are leading an intertribal advisory group that is basically guiding the restoration within the former reservoir reach area. So we're putting Indigenous leaders, Indigenous knowledge at the top of the food chain to basically guide all of the restoration. I'm really excited about that. We are also working on in-stream flows and acknowledging that, like, as we speak right now, salmon are actually all the way back into Oregon. Klamath salmon, you know, that came through my, that came through my, you know, home village. They went all the way up to Keno Dam, you know, past Oregon. And so we all are united in ways that we haven't been in 100 years. And what I love about that is the river is literally showing us how to reconnect, right? And our job is just to watch and to follow its lead. I'm also excited about my book coming out. It comes out on October 28th. It gave me an opportunity to really dive into all the things that I talked about in this lecture. I hope you'll consider buying it and reading it and learning more about the whole story. And I think one of the main messages in my book and what I learned about working on the Klamath was that anything seems impossible until it's done, right? And it's done, my friends. Like, those dams are out. They're not coming back. And already the river is fiercer than I have ever known it in my lifetime. The water is cleaner, it's cooler, and just the river's life force is stronger than I've ever seen it. So, having witnessed this historical effort, I believe that all humans have ancestral knowledge about what it was like to live on a healthy planet. It's in our blood, right? And that medicine, that good medicine is still here. It's in me, it's in you, it's in all of us. And whatever your project is, you know, whatever your it is, you can achieve it because the water remembers, the law remembers those treaty rights and we fight for them, and we remember. So together we can restore the balance and we can renew the world. So walk loud, walk loud. Thank you.
Amy,
Yeah.
thank you for so many things you've given us. Thank you for your deep wisdom and riveting strategy, which truly invigorates all of our minds. Thank you for your boundless inspiration, which renews all of our spirits. And thank you for your deep reflections and even moment of meditation, which will rest in all of our hearts as we all collectively move forward to capture and create the many promises of tomorrow, or the present, which is our present. Thank you so much. So it is my honor now to serve as moderator of our question and answer period. The way this will work is I'm going to prioritize the people in the room for quite some time, but there are also people on Zoom, many people on Zoom, who will submit questions over, I think, the chat function. So I invite people on Zoom, wherever you are in the world, to submit your questions on chat, and I will get to many of them. But for now, let's start with the people here in the room. Are there questions or comments? Or did you just leave everybody speechless? A question back there. Do you have your own mic or not? Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Amy, this was a fantastic talk. My name is Sarah Klein. I'm a brand new assistant professor in environmental studies, checking out the law program, law school. And I have this kind of tough question for you. This is an incredible story of transformation. And I was wondering if there's been effort in your nonprofit or in other groups to transform the relationship with the producers, the rural landowners who I would assume relied on water that was taken away from salmon, taken away from the rivers, where are they left in this story? Because they've lost something that they felt like was theirs, but the public trust, the public is better served with the river flowing. But I'm curious about efforts to transform that conflict-based relationship, hopefully into something healthier long-term.
Yeah, great question. And first off, so the Klamath dams didn't impact water allocation at all, so water rights weren't impacted. Nobody lost water that they were relying upon. The opponents were mostly the landowners around the reservoirs. And remember, I showed you all the toxic green water. Some people felt very strongly that they had bought lakefront property and didn't want riverfront property. And so they opposed it. What we ended up doing was creating a fund where if they had some loss in their property value, they were able to submit claims to the fund and then be compensated. But what I will tell you is since the river now looks like this picture, like this is literally what the river looks like, those people are a little less angry and happier now. We really don't have any complaints now. So, and I think that speaks to the wisdom of Indigenous leadership, right? Like they knew this was coming. And so it was like, okay, we'll get past these hard moments and back to this, and then everything's gonna be okay. And that really turned out to be true. Did somebody?
Question.
I just wanted to say that when you said that this project was completed on time, on budget, within the plan, that seemed unheard of to me. And I'm just wondering if there's any lessons learned in that aspect, or like how was that possible?
We had a remarkable CEO, Mark Bransom, who ran the project. So there was, the nonprofit created to remove dams, and then there was one contractor to do the physical deconstruction, and then another contractor to do the restoration work, who hired another contractor, which was the Yurok tribe, to work on the restoration work. And so so that was sort of like the chain of command, and everybody was like top notch. And it was hardcore, right? Because we basically had a year, and there were very specific limitations about when we could work in the river, to help mitigate negative impacts. And so everybody had to be at the top of their game. The permits were very specific about how, what, when, where, why. There were umpteen gazillion design plans. They call them design build plans that were done. So it was quite a strategic regime, I would call it, and a lot of constant coordination. Yeah, great question.
Question back there?
Yes. First of all, I want to say it's just thank you so much for everything you've done in this area, and sort of looking at the past now, going forward.
Yeah.
I was just curious, now that the roadless area conservation, the roadless rule has been rescinded, is there any effort? I don't know how much national forest is on your reservation land, but has there been any ideas of using, which I think is wonderful, law precedents, Indigenous law precedents, to say, okay, well, our hunting rights might be endangered if we clear cut our forests? Is there any, have you thought of that as well?
We haven't got that far, but if it came to that, absolutely. You use every tool. We have a very negative precedent in that area, the Ling case. I'm like, how many people know about that case? But woohoo! But that was, so I talked about our high country, that first picture I showed you all. That's a lot of that is on Forest Service land. And in the 1980s, the Forest Service basically proposed a road to be built right through our sacred areas. And we pushed a case all the way through the Supreme Court, relying on our, freedom of religion, constitutional rights. And I'll never forget this. Justice O'Connor, in her opinion, said, whatever rights the Indians have to that land, it is government land after all, and basically said, the government can do whatever it wants, and basically said, yeah, you can build this road even though, and they acknowledged, even though it was going to destroy and harm our religious freedoms. And it's one of like the worst, Second Amendment cases in the whole deal, and so, but we fought back and used state law to actually block that. And I think that speaks to, like strategies, right? Like if one doesn't work, just keep trying and lean into other sources of law. One thing we're really working on at UROC is developing our own UROC law. We declared personhood rights for the Klamath River under UROC law, which expands personhood rights for the Klamath River. That expands the legal protections available in tribal court under tribal law for the river. So you just got to keep the fight up, right? Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to take a question from Zoom, and then in the future I'm going to try to repeat questions from the audience so the Zoom audience can hear better. But this is a question from someone I greatly admire who's a leader and a steward of the Mackenzie River watershed, from Joe Mall, Executive Director of the Mackenzie River Trust. Question to Amy: can you speak more to how the lands made available by the reservoir draining will be co-stewarded by the states, tribes, land trusts, and others?
So yes, and great question. So there's, I think it's like, 20,000 acres, Steph, about that, within the former hydroelectric project area, and they're divided into two parcels. And on one parcel of land, there's going to be some exciting changes that we can't talk about yet. And then on another parcel of land, the state of California is going through a process with the tribes to figure out if it could be returned to the original inhabitants. So, we're really trying to move land back efforts through all of that and empowering the indigenous nations to be back in a stewardship role. So that's on the land back strategy, but then also, through this IPAC group that Ridges to Riffles is running, like, we are, shaping the landscape, right? And what's so cool about that is putting indigenous leadership in the driver's seat, right? A lot of times with co-management or, off-reservation lands, it's difficult for tribes to be in the right position to use their indigenous knowledge to help heal the land. And so this model we're using through this advisory group actually allows the tribes to be in, that leadership role that will empower them to then restore that land and make it what it should be. So yeah, great question.
Very good. Okay, question back there.
I just want to say thank you for your talk, and yeah, I'm really impressed with all the work that you guys have done. It seems like a major victory. One thing I am interested in, though, is I'm curious, whether with removing the hydroelectric power, whether you guys have come up with a plan in partnership with the power company about a new form of renewable energy that could replace that, or is there a plan?
Yeah, great question. And that speaks to a specific point around the larger point of finding rational paths forward. So we were lucky on the Klamath, and I think that Klamath dams were providing 0.2% of Pacificor's overall energy portfolio, and they already had replacement for that, so it didn't require any new projects. And so what was interesting, too, is that the company referred to the Klamath dams as legacy assets because they were dilapidated. They required a lot of investment to even keep them really functional. And so in a lot of ways, having the state come in, both Oregon and California, to help out paying for their removal was a really great deal for the company because they could get these legacy assets off their books. But that's, one of the things talking about and looking forward to next dam removal projects on the Snake. The Snake River dams, they provide a big percentage of energy. And so finding out like how do you replace that is a big piece of the overall puzzle to get to dam removal. Great question.
Rebecca?
This is, so you just described work that you're going to do going forward, and I assume that's through Ridges to Riffles.
So the work that you're going to be doing going forward, and the work you've done is through Ridges to Riffles. Is that a donor-supported organization? And if people here feel excited and want to contribute to the effort, in addition to purchasing the book by pre-order, I'm not a plant, but pre-order is the way to go.
I know, I'm like, yeah.
But I assume there's a website and a place to donate?
And I should put this on my last slide, which is, thank you so much. Yeah, and I continue to represent UROC through Ridges to Riffles, and we've got a brilliant Indigenous fish biologist. We have community organizers. We've got comms people, lawyers, grassroots organizers. And so we're sort of like a full house type service thing for movements. We're very focused on the Klamath because there's so much work to do. But yes, it's a nonprofit, it's foundation supported. The website is ridges2riffles.org. There's a way to make donations there, or come see me, and I'd be happy to help facilitate that as well. Yeah.
Great. We have a question. If microphone can go back here to Bart, right there. Thank you. I'm not going to repeat the question if it's on mic. Yeah.
Thank you. Bart Johnson, Professor Emeritus in Landscape Architecture. You said a lot of inspiring things today. One of them to me was to accomplish change, you have to see it first. I'm wrapping up my career now. You're still young. Would you be willing to share with us a little of what you see as your vision for what you'd like to see on the land as you are entering that phase of your life?
Oh, thank you for that question. I see a lot of health, like a lot of, the air feels good, the water is clean, I can go out to my traditional fishing hole, which is just on that side, down the hill there, below my village, and I can take my boys, maybe by then I can take my grandkids, and we can fish. There's big, beautiful salmon in the river when they're supposed to be there, and we can get enough salmon, and we have fun doing it because the river is clean. And take them up to the smokehouse, which is just on the other side of this hill, and smoke them up. We can have a big salmon dinner, and the whole family comes, and we enjoy that. I can send salmon up to the Klamath tribes, up to the Shasta, up to the Karuk, up to the Hupa. Maybe they'll send some deer down to me, and we can have a really good meal and be in community. And also, we can have healthy interactions. One of the things that I think colonization put all of us into is this culture of scarcity, right? Where we're fighting for resources, and we feel like our own livelihood is threatened. And I think what Klamath and what we're trying to do is get back to a culture of abundance, where we follow the Creator's instructions about living in balance. And one of the parts of that is you never fight over fish, you never fight over resources. And so I would love to see humanity working together and not fighting over things, but instead working to rebuild things so there's enough for everybody, so that we can all feel good, right? Like we all deserve to have good food. We all deserve to have clean water. And I think nature-based solutions like this get us to that place. So that's what I hope.
Wonderful. If you permit me, I'm going to take a Zoom question very quickly here. What are action items related to ocean conditions affected by climate change and fishing regulation to the treaty fishery?
Well, action items.
Yeah, action items.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really?
In just a minute, because I want to get to some more questions.
Well, here's how I'm going to answer that question, is that also going back to the cases, right? Like who's heard about US v. Washington? That is like a foundational case upholding the treaty rights of the tribes up in Washington. You've got that case that impacted the Washington tribes. You've got Matz versus Arnett, which involved Yurok. I think that I'm forgetting the name of the Oregon case. It might have been So Happy, but okay, yeah. All of those nations are now starting to work together again and rebuilding historical alliances. And so for the future, I think we could take the lesson from the Klamath and figure out, like, how do the salmon nations work together to leverage our collective fishing rights to make sure that things like, and dare I say, what is it, the ocean projects, hydropower, the wind energy.
Oh, yeah,
offshore wind, things like that don't negatively impact the ocean conditions. Making sure that we're not over-harvesting salmon out in the ocean. And then the habitat thing, one thing we've observed is, like, a few years back, the micro little, I'm getting out of my microbiomes, the little plankton. There hasn't been enough. And so, yes, thank you.
That's the work to do.
She does. See, this is why I have a scientist. I'm like, that little food. I mean, it's the same with those agronomists. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. So, yeah, hence why I have a scientist. There hasn't been enough food out in the ocean, right? And so those salmon, they're not getting as big, and so they come back and they're smaller. And also, it contributes to the orca whales, right? The Southern Oregon orca whale populations on the Endangered Species Act list, because there's not enough Klamath salmon and other salmon runs on the northwest coast to support them. So we can use those treaty rights to help, rebuild those salmon runs, and I think it starts with rebuilding the alliances between the indigenous salmon nations.
Excellent. Question over here. Yeah, we'll get the microphone to you.
Yeah, even though those dams weren't really flood control dams, I was kind of curious about, now that you got a natural river back, is there a little more concern about flooding, which is part of nature, and we're getting extra nature lately in a lot of places, especially downriver. You're close with your land use patterns for the tribe, and is that something that people are looking at more these days?
There isn't big concern about that. What I will say is we still have work to do. There are still 2 dams at the top part of the river up in Oregon. There's Keno and Link River. They do allow for fish passage, and they do provide some flood control. So we still have that. But, the hydrology of the basin has been such that, for better or worse, flooding really isn't an issue. Yeah.
Question over there with the mic.
So first of all, hayu masi ats. We never know why we're supposed to be here, but hearing your story today is what my heart needed. So I want to start by thanking you, sister. You and the courageous Klamath people and all the tribes in your area and the very hard work that they've done. So thank you for that. So you talked about, though, finding the next rational path forward. Yeah. And in this case, it's kind of an interesting twist in the whole story that the economic rationality of the equation led to the outcome that the tribes had envisioned for so long. But in the end, the economic case could be made to an economically rational company.
Yeah.
So my tribe is a Willamette Basin tribe. Okay. We have our dam problems as well. Yeah. Those dams, however, are run and operated by the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah.
And you may be familiar that the economic case for that power is not economically rational, and even the Bonneville Power Administration wants out. But it is not a company that is answering to the bottom line.
Yeah.
Do you have any insights on the difference between the owner of that dam being an economically rational company versus aspect of the military government that may not necessarily care what the economic bottom line is?
Yeah, excellent point. And there are, a lot of dams that are not subject to FERC or not owned by a company. And I think one of the lessons learned from the Klamath too, and then also looking at the Elwha or Penobscot, every dam is so different, right? And it has a different purpose, uses, economics, like user groups. And so really what you got to do is dive deep into whatever set of circumstances your dam has. And then I think that the course of still continuing to proceed to look at like, how do I solve this problem? How do I solve that problem? And just sort of going through the checks still is good. The Army Corps dams, that is a tough one, right? It's a tough one. And one thing I would recommend as a tool is to dive into the tribal consultation, right? Tribes can request consultations with government agencies at any time. And you can put forward your case of this is harming my way of life, this is harming these cultural natural resources. You can make those arguments, and I think that's a good way to start. It doesn't get you all the way there, but what I will tell you is, it took us 20 years to get dam removal, and in part because we had to do a lot of consultations. So it's a start. That's, and I know that's not satisfying. I wish there was some smoking gun that you could employ, but I do think empowering tribal voices and getting them in front of the agencies, and there's a lot of good, the trust responsibility. This dam is harming my way of life, and that's against the trust responsibility, right? Like those may not be like arguments that we could run to the courthouse steps with, but they sure can be persuasive in creating your long-term campaign. Yeah.
Okay, we have just a couple minutes. I'll take a question over there.
Thank you so much. Coming not from a law perspective, but from an organizing perspective, I'm curious if you have any perspective or wisdom to share on like what tools and practices were helpful in like navigating conflict or in like maintaining just the ambition and the scope of this project over such a long period of time.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
And I'm channeling my co-founder, Molly Myers, because she was really at the heart of the grassroots campaigns. She would say, like, you never take no for an answer. And she would probably use a lot of four-letter words. But I also think, like, funding and, organizing things like buses to go places and making sure people have food and water so that they can be hydrated and well-fed while they're out protesting, so that people flew to Scotland, for example. It's literally like funding the movement, but then really empowering the local people and helping them communicate in ways that others can hear too, I think is a good way of like kind of translating. And I'm doing this because you're like merging different energies, but empowering the people on the ground so that they can have that voice.
Well, Amy, I'm going to give you last opportunity to send us all out with a message.
Oh.
What is your message you want us to take out the door?
Okay, so the movement must involve radical joy.
Well, I put a wonderful speaker on the spot, and she gave us 2 words to take out the door: radical joy. Please join me in thanking Amy Cordalis.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. This was such a blast. It's so fun to be back and lost.